of day on a Wednesday. All beings considered, with the illustrious Dr. Crystal Heath and the prodigal son, Skyjack Morgan. Welcome. Got a good show planned today. I'm excited. Ooh, Dr. Crystal Heath in the house. The doctor is in. How are you today?
I'm kind of sad because Bimini, a dolphin at Miami Aquarium, passed away yesterday.
Yeah.
And she was 26 years old, and she had been suffering for a long time with a lot of different afflictions.
I saw that. How long does a dolphin, what can we expect from a dolphin as far as lifespan? Do you have that off the top of your head, doctor?
In captivity, median age is 29 years old in captivity. So she's a little bit below median, which, I'd expect, a good facility, you might see 30, 35-year-old dolphins. So, but she's lived a pretty rough life. And the USDA reports from back in March of 2024 describe how she had this complicated medical history, and the veterinarian was actually begging for her to be taken to a facility that could provide the care that she need, like SeaWorld. And here's what those reports said. According to her medical record, Bimini has been on at least 2 to 3 medications, antifungals, antibiotics, and corticosteroids since September of 2022 to treat persistent and serious pulmonary disease. Her last computed tomography, which is CT imaging, in February of 2023, identified multiple bilateral rib fractures in various stages of healing, some acute and causing pleural lesions, marked tracheal stenosis, moderate to severe diffuse lung disease with significant bronchiectasis, bilateral nephrolithiasis, so she's got kidney stones too, and fluid distending both uterine horns. So she's got hydrometra or pyometra, which these intact female dolphins do. And so another thing about these dolphins in captivity, they keep them on Regumate, which is sort of like birth control long term. And that leads to all of these uterine problems that they have. And, they're just swimming around sideways. Stuff can't just drain out. And so you see a lot of these sorts of uterine problems with them.
So was Bimini doing, she had all of these ailments. How were they making money off of Bimini if she was always in
it doesn't seem, so it says they, took her off of, she wasn't really performing or anything. She was at Dolphin Harbor. So there's Top Deck Tank that had Samantha, Gemini, Panama, and who was the other one? I forget.
Top Deck's the one that looks like a pirate ship or something, and they're on top doing tricks.
And then there's the Flipper Stadium where they have another show and they do tricks and stuff. And the Dolphin Harbor.
That's right, because Miami Aquarium is the home of Flipper. They've been doing this to dolphins since the 60s.
And the Dolphin Harbor is just where people interact with the dolphins, but they also have just hospitalized dolphins are in, and Dolphin Harbor is kind of packed with lots of dolphins in pretty small little pens.
I've seen that. Dolphin Harbor is the one where the guests wear this weird scuba helmet and they can kind of dunk down and look at the dolphins. They've got like a helmet that they put on.
No, that's the reef tank with the fish. That's the only other tank that does that. Dolphin Harbor is where you put a wetsuit on and you can go pet the dolphins and interact with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's like a big pool that the tourists can go and pet dolphins. And so she might have been there, but she wasn't doing the flips like Flipper.
No, and I think she wasn't really interacting with guests or anything. She was probably a financial burden and staff burden on them too. And I'm not saying that they did anything here other than just the USDA failed her here. The USDA was supposed to confiscate her and take her to another place that was better, like SeaWorld. They didn't do that. And, I'm just spreading rumors and gossip at this point, but it might have been because the attorney who worked for the dolphin company also worked for SeaWorld.
You get
and
away with it
kind
if
of,
we call it conjecture, I
yeah.
found, which is
I like
I mean,
spreading rumors and gossip better. It
well,
needs
explain
to
maybe.
allegedly just spread. These are just rumors and gossip. I like that instead of allegedly. I just think it's better.
Well, maybe you could explain to the fools like me, the layperson, why the USDA has anything to do with these circuses, these zoos, these what does PETA like to call them? Abusement parks or
Well, God,
things.
yeah. Now nobody's going to take you seriously because you sound like an
I
unhinged
said
moron.
PETA said it. Okay,
Yeah.
Miami
Um,
Seaquarium, places like Miami Seaquarium. What does the USDA have to do with that? The Department of Agriculture, isn't that just for cows, chickens, and pigs? We don't eat dolphins, at least not
yeah, it's kind
regularly.
of weird that we have passed the Animal Welfare Act, and so now USDA inspectors inspect animal facilities, and not just the
Mhm,
ones that produce animals for food, but also laboratories and zoos and dog breeders and all
mhm.
sorts of places. So yeah, back to Bimini's story.
Yes,
Uh,
Bimini. She was she an Atlantic or Pacific dolphin? She was,
I believe Atlantic, but I could be wrong.
and they're
Multiple.
small, I think, yeah.
What is this trivia?
Well, I just
I
was
can.
trying to like, 'cause I got a lot of questions about Bimini. I remember you and I went to look at Miami Seaquarium. I'm trying to paint the picture for myself and the audience. That's
Okay.
all.
Multiple rib fractures from several attacks resulted in pain and suffering. Marked tracheal stenosis, which denotes her limited ability to breathe in and out, could be appreciated by USDA VMOs. I think that's veterinary medical officers, I forget, officials, veterinary medical officials on physical examination. Her chuff exhale was harsh with deep raspy character to it. Overall, the significant internal disease noted on the radiology report requires further follow-up, as noted by the AV, which is the attending veterinarian. Bimini's pulmonary disease significantly affects her respiratory effort and quality of life. In conversations with training staff, Bimini is under direction of by the AV, who has restricted her from performing rides, tail pops, bows, and side breaches that may exacerbate her respiratory disease. Inspectors asked trainers to have Bimini demonstrate an approved behavior, and upon return to her trainer, Bimini produced an abnormal sounding forced exhalation, which sounded uncomfortable. This sound is similar to the chuff heard at rest, but shorter. An associate veterinarian prescribed Bimini received a follow-up. The veterinary prescribed that Bimini receive a follow-up CT imaging and bronchoscopy in September of 2023 prior to any adjustments to her current treatment plan. However, due to the lack of veterinary staff, equipment, and specialists, CT imaging and anesthesia, and more pressing critical animal cases, the AV has been unable to execute her recommendation from 4 months ago.
Oh my
Atlantic bottlenose dolphins with respiratory abnormalities often experience a rapid decline in health, which can result in pneumonia and death. They would require immediate veterinary attention with appropriate diagnostic equipment on site, as well as highly experienced staff to provide appropriate veterinary care and alleviate suffering. Correct. So this is the recommendation by the
Okay.
USDA. Correct by completing the CT imaging and bronchoscopy that was previously recommended in order to appropriately diagnose her current medical condition and develop an appropriate plan of care to ensure that the treatments provided are adequate to alleviate her ongoing suffering.
Did that
And now,
happen?
no, as far as I know, allegedly, me spreading rumors and gossip, no, that didn't happen. The AV ended up quitting Miami Seaquarium due to many of the problems here. The
Mhm.
AV wanted the USDA to confiscate this dolphin, allegedly. And allegedly, what happened yesterday was they noticed that Bimini was not eating. They tried
Wow.
to grab her and confine her to treat her, and she died while they were wrangling her, allegedly. So it's
They were
very
wrangling and
sad.
she just turned over and died. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that is a tragedy. These poor animals, I hate to put the animals, the animal activist hat on too much, but because you think no one will take me seriously, but man, I feel really bad for animals like this. She was in captivity every day of her life, and the only thing she knew was humans. and the kindness that she sought from our humanity just wasn't delivered. She only had us. She only had
Yeah.
us.
Well, I think, I know for a fact all of those trainers there love the animals and want to do the best they can for them. But the system set up by the dolphin company in Miami Aquarium makes that very difficult. They don't have the proper equipment needed to provide medical care for these dolphins in a like low stress,
Yeah.
fear-free sort of way.
Yeah. I
And
mean, don't
they
get me
don't
wrong.
have like the like at least SeaWorld has a thing where you can like lift up the dolphins,
Mhm.
like lower from the floor, and you don't have to go and wrangle them.
Yeah.
Miami Aquarium doesn't have that. So you end up using a little bit more aggressive handling
I mean, Miami
practices
Sea
than you would normally
Aquarium.
want
Miami
to.
Sea Aquarium is like a roadside zoo for dolphins and other sea mammals. I mean, it's and fish and some birds.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not a Sea World. People think that all these things are created equal, and they're
And
not.
SeaWorld's not great either. Like we
No,
went there and there's like, oh, there's some problems here too.
but
This
nowhere
is an older
near.
park,
Yeah.
but Miami Aquarium is so much worse. And it was a good facility for its time back in the
65 years ago.
1950s.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I
but
don't mean
even
I want
30
to say.
years ago, like I've talked to vets who worked there 30 years ago
Mhm.
and said left because 30 years ago it was an outdated facility.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the problem with Miami Aquarium. It needs to shut down.
Well, that's a problem with all of this like capital investment stuff, right? I mean, it's funny. I was talking to someone about how Circus in Las Vegas needs to close. It's been outdated for 30 years. It was outdated 60 years ago. The thing's been open for 75 years almost. And uh but they're not closing it because it continues to bring in money, and they're not really pushing too much money out to maintain it. So as long as this thing keeps making money, they don't want to close it. They're not going to tear it down. And I feel like something similar is happening here. I want to make clear, because it sounds like I was misunderstood a little bit. I don't mean to demonize the people that work there. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel for a species, especially for this one individual who looks to our humanity, and whether or not they meant to, we all failed her. All of us did.
Mhm.
Poor Bimini was failed by humanity, and all she had was
She was failed
humanity.
by the USDA, who was
Yeah.
responsible for making sure that she was protected
Yeah.
from this company, and they failed her in this
Yeah.
instance. They did not transport her to a better facility, and who knows what went on there. Like I'm sure SeaWorld also is like, I don't want this old dolphin with all these health problems that we can't
Can't make
profit
money off of, right?
from. We're just
No one
gonna have
wants
to
to see
take
this
care of
old
her until she
wheezing
dies, and
dolphin.
then
Yeah.
when she dies in our custody, all the activists are gonna be like, SeaWorld killed this dolphin, blah, blah,
Yeah, they were never
blah.
gonna rewild Bimini. That was everyone just waiting
No,
for her to
she
die.
was born in captivity. She's
Right.
like your dog in your house who loves you, and if you let that dog go out on the streets, the dog's not going to do well. And same with these captive dolphins. They are very much like dogs. They love people.
Mhm. It's
But
all they've ever
they're
known.
born in captivity. That's all
Yeah.
they know.
Yeah.
And nobody's advocating that captive born dolphins be released into the wild. I
And she's
think
so
that's quite
it
foolish.
is there is something a bit obscene about Miami Sea Aquarium in particular, because it is something like 50 feet from the real ocean. It's so close to the ocean, and these animals are there's just a wall between them and the actual ocean. There's something
Yeah.
very obscene, something oddly offensive. I'm not saying just break open the wall or anything, but
It's
it
just
is.
the same thing, like you have these parrots there, right, on these perches,
Yes.
and then you have wild birds flying around free at the same time. And it's
Yeah,
like,
and the
I
parrots
wonder
are
what they think
mute.
about that.
Yeah, I wonder what the parrots do think with their wings all cut off of them. Yeah, it's a prison for them in many ways, but unfortunately, it's kind of like dogs and cats. We've kind of painted ourselves in a corner here. They bred them. This is why. How do you feel about this idea, this sanctuary model for places like this, where they're not allowed to breed them? They're
I think
there
that's a
to.
great idea.
I think it's a pretty good idea too. I had never, I didn't really hear about that until we were in Florida, and our friend was telling us about that, Shannon, about trying to get some of these organizations to the transition from spectacle sideshow thing to a sanctuary model where people can come and look at the animals that we're trying to rehabilitate or
and
maintain.
see kind of making steps in that direction, but they're also bleeding money at this point too. So I don't know how long that's going to, like, if you were going to be a sanctuary model, you need foundations and stuff to support that. Like, do you have people pay tickets money to go see a sanctuary? Is that even ethical? I don't know.
I mean, a conversion into a nonprofit status could be an interesting option. I mean, there's different ways that you could maybe something like they're maintained. What about the USDA? They seem to have billions of dollars for all sorts of corporate owned animals. Why couldn't they help out?
Yeah, for sure. Like, animals are part of society, and we have a duty to provide them with the care that they need, as well as humans, which we are failing to care for humans as well. But if the money that we currently pay to billion-dollar corporations was instead used to make sure everybody in society had their basic needs met and healthcare met, then we would be actually saving a lot of money, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In the case of the USDA, though, these animals fall directly under their purview. These animals are the responsibility of the USDA. I mean, here we are, and why isn't the USDA doing something? What you said is that the USDA failed Bimini, but in a lot of ways, we all have failed Bimini. I mean, I think it is tragic that we allowed this to happen, and the USDA is working on our behalf. It really. You said a little sad. This stuff gets to me. Poor Bimini, man. It gets to me. It makes me angry.
What should we do now as society who has failed her? What do we do to repair that and make sure more dolphins don't die in the meantime?
I guess, like, remember Bimini and tell her story, elevate the story about Bimini and how Miami Seaquarium has failed her. Try to prevent it from happening to other dolphins, right?
Yeah, do some FOIA requests. Try to talk to your friends at the USDA and be like, tell me what happened here. Why was she not transferred? And how can we make sure that the other dolphins get transferred fast and that the veterinarian who's working there gets the help that she needs to provide care for those animals? Unfortunately, I've lost contact with all of my people in contact, who I had, communications with on the inside. So I don't have anybody on the inside now to understand what's going on. But I really, if anybody who works there wants to reach out to us, like, we are here to listen and help and not judge. We just want to help, and we want to help in the best way we can. And we don't want to get anybody in trouble. We just want to help the animals. So if you know somebody who works there, let us know what's going on. We can brainstorm, how do we get these animals out of there and away from this company, and to provide them with the care that they need. I can only imagine all of the other seals and sea lions there, because there were a lot of seals and sea lions who needed medical help too, and I don't know what their status is. So
I mean, we've seen lots of sick animals at Miami Seaquarium. I wonder about things like, I mean, this might seem a long time ago, before the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln tried to come up with a scheme where he would pay slaveholders for their slaves' freedom. That was the plan. The slave owners said no. I still, it was a way to avoid war, but then it just didn't end up happening. So I wonder a similar scheme for animals that are imperiled in places like sideshow zoos, what do you call them? Street sides, highway side zoos, roadside zoos, and Miami Seaquarium. What if we raised money? Like, we have all these animal rights organizations. Why couldn't they raise money for Bimini and just give that money to the devil SeaWorld and say, here's all this money, take this dolphin and just let her live. Like, just try to give her a couple more years. Bimini was already 24, 25, you said. She's only going to live for 5 more years. How much is it going to take to feed a dolphin for 5 more years and give her vet care? It couldn't be that expensive.
Or we could pressure SeaWorld or other people who are supporters of zoos to take some responsibility and do that instead of us wasting our resources on something that people who supposedly love zoos and want to protect them, that's what they should be doing.
You're right. That is what they should be doing. I just think about how, animal rights activists aren't unwilling. They seem to be more than willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to stuff like this. And
I don't know if that's a good use of resources.
Yeah.
Of course, there are wealthy donors who, tried to basically do that with Lolita.
Yeah.
But she was in a state where she could not be moved. She was too sick as it was. It was like too little too late at that point. And that was,
I guess that's
sad.
the big problem, isn't it? We always do it too little too late. It was probably too little too late for Bimini too. There's probably not much.
I think and who knows, like the stress of moving her might have done her in sooner, and it's tough, but it's not too late for a lot of those animals who are still there. And we have to also remember the crappy water, the gross, turbid, contaminated E. coli contaminated water that all of those animals are living in. That's a huge problem. And that maybe contributed to the death of Lolita and the death of course, Lolita was old, but she had also been on multiple antibiotics for many years.
And Lolita was a much more sizable animal. We're talking about an orca versus a little Atlantic bottlenose dolphin. I mean, there's a lot of, quantitative differences here, but I mean, saving whales just seems the way they move whales and everything just seems just impossible. A dolphin, I don't know. Seems like, feels like I could get a dolphin out of the water. And I feel like me and a couple friends could get a dolphin to SeaWorld if she's going to make the trip.
But there's other Miami Seaquarium news too about what the future of the park is. The fate of the Seaquarium is now playing out in federal court filings after the Dolphin Company, which operates the 38-acre parcel on public county-owned land, filed for bankruptcy, which paused the county's eviction proceedings. The bankruptcy court has asked us to pause the eviction tract. District 7 Commissioner Raquel Regalado told Local 10 News on Monday. In this window of litigation, two developers, Terra Group and Integra Investments, are eyeing a potential opening, exploring what redevelopment uses are permitted on the site as the bankruptcy judge considers selling the Dolphin Company's lease with the Miami-Dade County. Regalado said the bankruptcy court will choose who better fits the financial situation to take that spot and then bring it to the county commission. I will bring them that item. It will go through the public process and we will determine if we accept that amendment of the party to this lease, Regalado said. When asked if she knew what Terra and Integra had both proposed, Regalado said, "I have only been informed of the Terra proposal, which was presented as a stalking horse under the bankruptcy rules, which was just an opportunity to discuss with me and the county attorneys what the intended uses are and what uses are and are not permitted. What Integra is proposing is harder to say. Entire slides of this redevelopment proposal have been redacted page after page with details blocked out under a notion that trade secrets are exempt from public disclosure." FOIA alert. And I haven't filed FOIAs of Miami for a while, and maybe it's time to do that too. The firm's portfolio does showcase marinas, which Regalado said would be a permitted use at the site, even under Article 7 of Miami-Dade's Home Rule Charter governed parkland, which reads that the site should be held in trust for the education, pleasure, and recreation of the public. What does the charter say? Parks, aquatic preserves, and lands acquired by the county for preservation shall be held in trust for the education, pleasure, and recreation of the public, and they shall be used and maintained in a manner which will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations as a part of the public's irreplaceable heritage. They shall be protected from commercial development and exploitation, and their natural landscape, flora and fauna, and scenic beauties shall be preserved. Regalado said marinas are within the existing uses of the lease. This property is held by this lease, and this lease did contemplate a dock, and this county has a tremendous need for marina space and dry dock storage. Regalado said one of the reasons that we have so much congestion on the Rickenbacker Causeway is that we do not have marina space. Daniel Wakeen, an attorney and former Miami Seaquarium animal caretaker and diver, said he doesn't buy it. I wish I could say I was shocked, but it's the most Raquel Regalado thing to say that we're getting parkland, so I'm going to turn it into a boat parking. It's protected under Article 7 of our Home Rule Charter that says that parkland has to be protected and used for the people and recreation and preservation. And she's turning around and trying to sell it to developers. She's turning around and giving the dolphin company that has committed all these horrible things to animals that they were charged with caring for an opportunity to profit off of their lease when the lease shouldn't exist anymore. And now she's going to give them the opportunity to try to sell it somewhere else, which is particularly egregious when you know that the lease says that the county has to approve anyone that it's sold to. Regalado said the county is not in a position to purchase the lease on a very expensive piece of land. So as much as we would love to make it a park, the county cannot afford to make this a park. We just went through an entire process on trying to eliminate fees that we charge at parks, and our park system has a lot of issues. One of the things that I plan to do with this property is that whatever funds would come to the county would go directly to our parks department to help us with our existing parks and expand our park portfolio. So lots of interesting back and forth with them. I think they can just take the lease away and say, like, get out of here.
I kind of thought that was the original. I thought that's what we all understood was about to happen. It doesn't seem. I think
we can't afford to purchase the lease. I feel like that's we're being gaslit there.
Totally gaslit. Yes, that's gaslighting. They said they're rejecting, revoking the lease. They're leasing from the county, so they're rejecting the lease. Lease it to somebody else. What's the problem?
This is why I want to talk to Daniel, and we're going to work out a time to talk to him about that. He couldn't make it today, but maybe some other time we can.
He's the lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be wonderful because it does seem like a gigantic FU to everyone who has worked so hard on this. And also the county, what was her name? Mayor Cava of the county, who said that the lease is over. It's done. We're not going to lease to the Miami Seaquarium. Finito, ixnay the aquarium a. And it's like, but here we are. This is ridiculous.
There's a lot of things I'd want to discuss because, like, from what I understand, the mayor also had the right to confiscate the animals and didn't. The USDA had the right to confiscate the animals and didn't. It's like people in positions of power are not doing.
They don't want the headache.
The thing that they can do.
This is why I think protest and demonstrations work, because you need to give them the political will to do it. These people people in high-end positions, they're the lazy class. They don't want to do anything. They get elected and they don't really want to do the hard work.
Are you projecting?
No, I don't think people up there at the very high levels want to do the work, and you have to push them to do the work. I think that once they get elected, think about how in national politics, it takes so much for them to do anything. Congress notoriously, and this is independent of party, irrespective of party, it's so hard to get them to do anything. But when you protest and you write letters and you start making noise, they start doing stuff. They go, oh yeah, that's my job. I guess I do have to do that. That's what these people up top need to get. That's what they need. They need that support. Yeah. It's not really bullying. I don't think they need to be bullied. They just need to be supported so that when they make these decisions, they could say, look, I got people out front of my office screaming and yelling about these dolphins.
Yeah.
Obviously,
when you have veterinarians saying these they need to be confiscated, and you have attorneys saying you have the right to confiscate those animals.
That's I mean.
Helpful.
Yes, absolutely. You need community members and people, like you always say, people with legitimacy who are speaking on behalf of these animals. And it's not just the animals. It's anything. It's anything And this is what I think one of the tragedies of the last 10 years. You're seeing people really interested in politics, but don't know what to do with that. Don't know how to participate. They'll wear the hats and they'll wear the jerseys. They wear the jerseys, but they're not actually going to get involved. And we need people to get involved.
Yeah, like use your skills, whatever your skills are. Is it writing? Is it graphic design? Is it speaking? Is it just holding a sign? Like get connected with a group and do that.
And even if you don't, if you feel like you have none, you can, like, you know what I did this week, doctor? I wrote an email. I didn't actually write it, but I wrote an email to Governor Gavin Newsom. And you know what it was about? Can you guess?
Cadillac?
Yes, it was about the Cadillac. They want to let all these animals rot on their properties. They want to put them in pits as the temperatures increase and more animals die every summer, and the floods get worse, and more animals die every time there's a flood. They would just want to be able to bury those animals out there. And so I went to the portal at ca.gov, and there's a portal to contact the governor, and you just copy an email into there, and it even has a drop-down menu, Crystal, where you could drop down and pick AB 411.
Oh, nice.
You just pick it, and you say, this is what I'm angry about, and then it has, do you con or pro? I click con. And then there's a part like, would you like to write a comment? Here's my comment. I copy and pasted it from ourhonor.org, and now I've done something, and they have to count it. It's my freedom of speech. They're required by law to count how many people in the community do this. It's really interesting. And I know that we've got other topics, and I want to tell you one thing, kind of off script, if you don't mind, that I think that you might find interesting. So it has to do with AB 411. And so I went, you went to Baker Commodities recently. You remember telling us about that on the show? And it's funny because I was looking at the pictures you took, and aside from the gruesome one of the giant, when you said truck was dropping off so many just body parts, I in my mind's eye thought of a very not such a large truck. That was a massive dump truck of body parts that they were just dumping on the ground. And there was a logo, and I saw that logo, and I remembered when I was a kid, my first job was digging ditches in Las Vegas. In the desert. I dug ditches on construction sites and cleaned up construction sites. And my father had a keychain of Baker Commodities. It was just the logo of Baker Commodities. And my dad, I don't really talk to him very often because he doesn't live near me, and he's kind of he's got a memory problem. He's not well off. He doesn't have good health. But I asked him, because he has a really hard time remembering short things that just happened, But I asked him, hey, when I was 13 and I went to go work on that construction site, you remember that? And he said, yes. And I said, do you remember that keychain you had with Baker Commodities on it? And he said, yes. And I said, why did you have that? Why would you, a construction guy, have Baker Commodities? What's the deal? Like, they're beef renderers. And he remembered sharp. He was like, well, we had to use them sometimes. It wasn't just rendering. Sometimes there's stuff on properties, especially out there in the desert, where people have been dumping stuff for a long time. And this is why 411 came to mind. People dump dead bodies out there. They dump chemicals out. They dump all sorts of stuff out there. And as a developer, a construction guy, I would go out there and you'd see some stuff. And all you know is that the smell is not just regular decay. There's something else happening, or there's sometimes gypsum. People put gypsum out there to try to, and so they call Baker Commodities, and Baker Commodities will go out there and do kind of like a cleanup, and they know how to deal with decaying flesh and chemicals, or the combination of the two.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So I thought that was so
common
interesting.
Problem.
Well, I want to share that with you because it is something that happens out in the high desert. And so I asked him, well, have you ever had? Can you think of a time? Because again, I'm trying to get his memory out. Can you think of a time that you did call them? And he said yes. And he said it was. He said they went out, and as soon as they broke ground, this horrible smell came out of the earth, and a lot of different stuff had been buried out there, different animals, and just they're not sure. called Baker Commodities. It says it's very expensive, but they go out there and they prepare the land, because you buy lands and you want to build a shopping center. That's what mostly my dad did when I was that age. He was building shopping centers out in Victorville in Las Vegas, and these are big pieces of land. And as soon as they break ground, they don't know what they're buying. They just know what they're building, right? And then, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting kind of follow up to.
So they would ship dead bodies all the way out from Las Vegas to Fresno?
No, I don't know.
More rendering, or is there more Baker Commodities locations?
I have a feeling there's more than one office. This is all in the high desert that my father was talking about when he called Baker Commodities. But maybe they have field offices, or I'm not really sure how their business works, but I'm guessing they do a lot more. I think what is in Fresno is their beef rendering facility, because even those signs that you took pictures of, it said no body dumping, and we do not. I thought this was interesting. It had a sign on Baker's that said, we don't process goats or sheep.
Yeah.
What? So I guess it's just like purely their beef facility. All I know is that they do more than just that, right? So I'm not exactly sure, but the logo was the same, and my father used to be one of their customers, I guess. So
interesting.
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But AB 411, if anybody lives in California, please go to the ca.gov and please leave a message for Governor Gavin Newsom not to sign AB 411. We're running out of time. The more people who try to convince him to not sign AB 411, we can keep all these cows from being buried in the desert or in the Tulare area, and keep them from infecting our water table, and keep them from turning into methane and poisoning our environment.
Yeah, and we don't need more nitrates in the Central Valley Aquifer either.
Right.
That's going to worsen the subsistence of that aquifer. And, we don't want flooding to dislodge thousands of bodies.
No.
Float around and to spread disease and all of this stuff. So please do.
Hopefully not.
But I also, this past weekend, let's change the topic. I went to the Reptile Super Show in Anaheim, California.
Yeah.
Has anybody in the chat ever been to a reptile show before? I guess this is one of the largest in the world, and it was pretty horrifying. There were thousands of reptiles in little containers, and I had, gotten word that these reptile shows are pretty much scofflaws. They just get away with breaking all sorts of rules. And of course, reptiles aren't covered under the USDA Animal Welfare Act, but there are rules about you can't sell turtles who are smaller than 4 inches, mostly because of salmonella concerns, because in the 60s and 70s, kids would get sick with salmonella from these turtles, and they said 4 inches because that's the turtle's bigger than 4 inches. The kids don't put in their mouths.
That's so weird. Did you ever have a pet turtle or reptile growing up?
I did.
Me too.
I had box turtles. I had ball pythons. I had iguanas, Nile monitor, all sorts of critters. Yeah.
I when I was a kid, we found a snapping turtle, and we brought it to we didn't know what it was. We found it in the street, and we took him to a reptile guy. And he's like, no, your kids shouldn't have this animal. They're really not gonna. They're gonna bite the kids. So they gave us a box turtle that became my pet for a while. But my parents were like, you have to wash your hands because of salmonella every time you touch this turtle. It was a big. That's how I found out what salmonella was.
Yeah. I remember that too. But I kind of wonder, I want to do public records requests of the Anaheim Public Health Department, see if there's any increase in salmonella sicknesses from this huge convention. And there were no signs anywhere warning people about salmonella risks or anything. And there were like food, booths next to reptile booths, and people just touching reptiles. And some of the booths had hand sanitizer, but a lot of people just like reaching over and touching animals and stuff all over the place. So this is a video that has kind of gotten a lot of attention that I took at this place. So we can, sorry, it's the vertical and you might not be able to see it that well, but
Yeah, it's as big as I can get it, unfortunately. I thought I
Yeah.
could get it bigger, but this is as big as it comes. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
That's never mind. Um,
That's what she said, yes.
I wasn't
Yeah,
gonna say it. That's a horrible joke. It's better told by you than me, though.
yeah.
All right, thank you. This is it. Do you want the sound? Here we go. He's on his back, Crystal. That can't be right.
Yeah. So this little
It's like a gecko or
I don't
something?
know, a bearded dragon or
A little guy.
I don't know exactly what a chameleon or something. I'm not sure. I know I think it's too big for a chameleon. Might have been a type of bearded dragon or something like that. But
Okay.
on his back in this tiny cup, and at this point,
Just
so
writhing.
tempted just to pick up that cup and walk out, you know?
Open rescue.
But I sat there recording. I'm like, I'll just get this footage for a bit, see what happens. A lot of people were upset by this sight.
Oh, well, that's
And
something.
yeah. And one woman, basically got the people's attention and like, you need to do something about this. And mostly the thing was that the reptile was stuck on their back. And so what they did was they just flipped him upright, put him back in this little container, and that was it. So he was still in the same container, but he was no longer on his back anymore.
Jason says they sell turtles from the old ice cream trucks on the sides of the roads here in Florida. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff. Also, the hermit crabs.
Yeah.
People sell hermit crabs in California, like just. I'm sorry, Florida. You don't see that much in California. I've never seen a hermit crab for sale except at like a mall in California, but not for years. Florida's a little different when it comes to animals. I mean,
yeah, but they still nobody is enforcing these laws. I saw a species. I'm like, well, they need to have the right permits, and anybody buying these species needs to have permits. These are endangered species. And I didn't have time to go, I was just their document. I didn't have time to go around to everybody and, talk to them and get all the information about what they had and what they didn't have. But I did have some interesting conversations with people about, there was one place from Michigan, and I'm like, so how do you get these animals here? Do you truck them all the way over here? And like, no, we just ship them, and I should have asked too, like if
what
I had
percentage
time,
DOA?
How many died? Do you have any sick ones now that you need to get rid of? I'm happy to take any sick animals. I talked to one guy who had a booth of ball pythons. He is in Burbank, and he told me he's going to get into selling venomous snakes next. That's illegal in Burbank, but it's what he's going to do. So
is reptile shows. So it's funny. I just asked because you said about the licensing, and so I just asked. Reptile shows can sometimes function like a loophole for regulated illegal animal sales because it's messy and depends a lot on which laws, federal versus state versus local, the species involved, and how strictly authorities enforce those laws. That ends up like the gun show loophole, like the analogy. Because that's what happens with gun shows. You don't know which laws are applicable, so basically none get enforced.
Checking.
Right.
And there totally should be USDA veterinarians at these events, making sure that all the paperwork is in order, that they're not the obvious thing is it's illegal to sell turtles under 4 inches. And they were selling hundreds of turtles under 4 inches. Easy violation there. And we can say it's a stupid law, but it's the law and nobody's following it. It's interesting how we enforce some laws and not others.
Well, they're using it the context of private sellers selling to private buyers in order to escape.
It's still illegal.
Strict oversight.
Still illegal.
Oh yeah, and many sellers at reptile shows and expos are hobbyists or small
Yeah,
breeders who
they
claim they're
don't know what they're
making
doing.
occasional private sales rather than operating as a licensed dealer. And in
Yeah.
some
I think people
jurisdictions,
just don't know the rules either.
yeah. Also, I'm guessing in Florida, a lot of those rules just are scofflaws. I mean, I bet you. I mean, every state seems to handle this stuff differently.
Yeah.
Um,
But I know a lot of groups are getting together and trying to ban animal sales in Anaheim. So that might be another good move and a good way to talk about this and get these images out there into the public of what these shows really look like. And I saw so many people with their kids going in there, and they're just like, oh, this is a fun day out with the kids, go see
yeah, I mean, sure. When
reptiles.
I was a kid, I would have loved going to a reptile show. Why wouldn't I?
But like they really like, and just the normalization of like displaying animals in these plastic cases that are too small, not providing adequate habitats for them, and just like treating them like objects is very disturbing. And I'm glad there were activists out there who were um, voicing concerns, yelling and screaming. But I think a lot of people just roll their eyes at them. And I'm thinking, what would be a more effective demonstration? Maybe having like stuffed dogs in those little plastic containers, like people in plastic containers.
Oh, that's
So
like what
like
PETA does, right?
people,
The street performance.
yeah, just having like people in little plastic containers, and people seeing that and being like, what's that about? And then they go into the expo and see all of these animals in these little plastic containers. It's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, it certainly is jarring to see that stuff. But when you said that other people were having a problem with these little animals being stuck like this,
with
these aren't the
just that.
demonstrators.
No, these are people who were at the expo
Yes. Okay.
who were looking at that one particular animal. For the most part, and I should have actually talked to more of the spectators, but I just, I got so much footage. And I was talking to the people who ran the booths
Mhm.
mostly, but I wish I would have like just hung out and talked to regular people and ask them what they thought of the event. Maybe even having somebody doing a post event survey of the public when they come out, being like, what did you think of the husbandry of the animals and the welfare of the animals there? Like scale of 1 to 10, like good, bad. Just seeing what the average was. This whole event a benefit for the reptile industry, or was it harmful to them? Um, did the maybe that would be a good way of telling whether animal rights demonstrations outside of events like this
When
have
you
an
were
effect.
looking
Like, does it frame people when they go in? Are they questioning things more than they would have if there's no animal rights activists in there at all demonstrating?
the efficacy of the, I mean, I don't know. That'd be people always want to poo-poo any kind of demonstration. No, I don't care. It doesn't have an effect on me. People always say
No,
that. It's
we
hard
don't
to
have
take.
to say that. Like, I wouldn't frame it like that. This is why I'm so careful with surveys. Just be like, hey, I'm from the Reptile Society. We want to ask your feedback on how the thing was today. What did you think of the welfare of the animals?
Yeah.
How positive of a sentiment do you have about the reptile industry? Do that at a reptile show where there is animal rights activists there, and do that
Yeah.
as at a reptile show where there's not animal
I'm
rights
from
activists there.
Herpetology Weekly. Would you
Yes,
be
exactly.
uh
Fill out
okay,
this
but
anonymous survey. Yeah.
let me ask you this though, because you, while you were there, said something on one of our Signal chats about how you thought that reptile people are so much like, I think you compared them
Mhm.
to maybe horse people. You said
Yeah.
that they're this close to becoming animal rights people. Why
Yeah.
would you say that? What do you mean? Because you wrote that under a picture of somebody holding a large reptile. What do you mean that they're almost animal rights people? They're buying and selling animals. They're putting them in little boxes. I don't understand.
Here are people who love animals, who are not necessarily charismatic animals, who are kind of creepy to most people. They're not like cute, cuddly animals, but they seem to like love them. And, and they also look a lot like animal rights activists, a little weird, lots of
Hey,
tattoos. Um, that sort of thing, like,
They're kinda on the
maybe
fringe, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
reptile lovers, the creepy
Mhm.
crawlies. It's funny you say that. I don't see reptiles as like that at all. I guess snakes, I understand why people are afraid of snakes because they're
But they're like
they
the people that had tarantulas there and bugs and yeah.
yeah, I can get what people are afraid of tarantulas. I mean I've encountered wild tarantulas, and they're a little startling when you see one in the wild. They're a little unpredictable. Spiders, I guess. But big lizards and stuff, they're so chill. They're all kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of noble. Even a turtle, they kind of look at the sun they're always looking at the sun, turtles. They're always kind of bathing in the sunlight. They seem so noble, like lions or something.
Mhm.
I always liked them, but I guess you're right. Most people do see them as like not quite as deserving of love, and reptile people do love them. I say Leif Erikson knew a guy that kept several monitors. He was also a zoology major.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I guess maybe these people they not, and also they don't eat them. They don't eat them. Dog lovers
Yeah.
still eat mammals, but reptile lovers don't eat lizards, don't eat snake
That
jerky, I don't
was
think.
one thing, like, if I had more energy, to extrovert or had somebody else there, I a lot of these animals, like, people eat turtles, obviously, and people eat snakes. I
Snake for sure.
ate
Gator.
snake when I was younger. My family killed a rattlesnake on our property, and
You
we
ate it?
barbecued it. Yep,
Oh my god.
that's what you do
That's
in the
what you do out
country,
there in
yes.
the Northern California
You
wilderness.
eat things,
Well,
but,
people sell,
eventually
snake jerky off the side of the road. I mean, people
mhm.
sell it, yeah.
So people do eat these animals,
Yeah.
and it'd be kind of an interesting thing to be like, "Hey, I just wanna purchase one of your ball pythons just as like a we're gonna serve it for my cousin's birthday."
It's a
How
special occasion. She
what
loves it.
would the seller think about that? Like, "Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love this one. This is a pretty color. Yeah, this is what we're gonna use them for."
Do you have any preparation recommendations? Do you have
Yeah.
any,
Have
like,
you ever
rubs?
eaten
Yeah.
snake before? I bet I don't know, depending
Were they
on where
sell
they
Was
grew up.
anybody selling Did you notice anybody selling, snake flesh to eat, any reptile flesh for consumption?
No, I no, none for consumption. That's for sure,
Because
no.
even people eat spiders too. I mean, I've seen people, like, in certain Asian cultures, they eat,
Yeah.
like, spider shish kebabs looking, eat them off of a little skewer. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, did they ha why not sell them to be eaten?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
sure
it'd be
they
interesting to see what
Were they
the,
selling mice?
sellers would think. Oh, yeah, they had frozen mice. There was a lab there with refrigerators full of frozen mice for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kinda mice and crickets, right? I bet they had a lot of crickets for sale too.
Mhm.
So weird. See, that's what I think is weird. People get really into reptiles, and you're always just feeding whole
Mhm.
animals to these animals. There's something sadistic there. This is why I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think they're borderline animal rights activists. There's something more shadowy going on
Well,
with
the snake
reptile
people
people.
are different,
Yeah,
but
snake people.
like, if you're buying iguanas or, like,
Uh,
those sorts of animals that eat veggies,
mm.
uh,
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you're right. Turtles, I think people who like turtles, I think, are pretty. Turtles are cute. Turtles are
yeah.
turtles are kind of cuddly, sort of, kind of.
Mhm.
So, what are your takeaways here on the Anaheim thing? What do you think? Should we no more demonstrating at?
No, I don't know. I would just like, maybe a little bit of effort into what kind of demonstrations are most effective, and it would be great if there was more exit surveys, done of these exit surveys of events with animal demonstrators, without, that were very objective and non-biased and didn't lead people to believe that the survey had anything to do with the animal rights demonstration. I think there's a way to do that, and I hope more people who join together to do demonstrations. That's a role that needs to be filled for these demonstrations. Sure, there's a person holding the sign, passing out the pamphlets, but there also needs to be that exit survey person.
I think would be kind of cool is like put a step and repeat that looks like it looks like a photo op, and then have somebody just doing like a live stream and just saying, "Hey, can I ask you a couple questions?" Stand in front of the thing
Mhm.
and ask them a couple questions about, and they don't have to be a debate bro questions, just
Yeah,
kind of
no.
basic. basic kind of fact finding. See if they can seed planting, if you will.
And I'm personally just more like of an anthropologist mindset. Like, I just want to understand what people believe and why they believe it, more than convincing anybody of what they should believe or persuading. I'm not interested in persuading anybody. I'm interested in understanding at this point why people believe the things they do and what could cause them to shape their mind too.
A couple Socratic questions that lead people to just some critical thinking that investigates their own preconceived notions might actually help more than trying to bat someone in the head with your own ideas. I think.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. I think that asking a couple of questions that gets people like maybe self-examine a little bit, you know. How do you feel about this? Did you think that the animals were well treated? Did they have enough room to move around and stuff? How much was it to get into the animal?
It was super cheap. The parking, I think, was more expensive. It was like $20 for parking or something like that, and then like $15 to get in or something.
And just at the Anaheim Convention Center. It's a good location. It's funny. I've never been to I've never been to a reptile show. And did you get some good pictures? Because when we were doing a post about all of the exotics that are killed by vet schools, we didn't have many pictures of exotics, and now I'm hoping you got lots of pictures of exotics.
I got over 700 photos, and I'm editing them now, and I'm submitting them to a thing. Hopefully, I don't want to say what, but hopefully they'll be up soon in a couple of weeks. But I'll also save them to our Google Drive too.
Sweet, so. I can't wait to share them. I think that's great. Well, Doctor, we've talked about mammals, we've talked about reptiles, we've even talked about bovines. What else are we worried about this week?
What else are we worried about this week?
Well, we've got the USDA report with Bimini. We've got Bimini, AB 411, and we've got the reptile show in Anaheim, and we've got I can't think of any more animal news that's on my radar, to be honest with you.
The declaw ban passed. Now it's just waiting for the governor to sign. So I think the Paw Project is asking people to contact Gavin Newsom and just encourage him to sign it. So like,
I'll do that.
That might be a good thing to do. I think he's going to sign it anyway, so I wouldn't be too worried about it. But coming up next, we have Dr. Rebecca Niemiec, who, let me pull up her bio here. She is the co-director of the CSU Animal Human Policy Center and associate professor in the Human Dimensions of Natural Resources Department at Colorado State University. So we have another Coloradoan here this week, like Dr. Queston was from Colorado as well.
Also. I wonder if they know each other.
Colorado people.
We do love Colorado.
We could ask that. She has served as the manager of the Bureau of Animal Protection for the state of Colorado, where she and her team addressed domestic animal mistreatment throughout the state. She has authored over 30 peer-reviewed scientific publications and has led stakeholder processes and conducted social science research focused on human dimensions of conservation and animal protection. Dr. Niemiec, which I should probably ask her how to say her last name.
It's got to be Niemiec, Dr. Rebecca Niemiec. I don't know. I've read it so many times, and I was thinking the same thing. It's either Niemiec or Niemiec. But I think it's Niemiec.
I just call her Becky. So she has a PhD.
I just call her doctor. Just don't call her late for dinner.
Yeah. In environment and resources from Stanford University, and a BA in ecology and environmental studies from Dartmouth College. So
very cool. Well, I'm going to bring her on right now, but before I do, please hit the like button to thank Dr. Becky Niemiec for being on the show. I'm always so inspired when we talk to our favorite veterinarians out there. Let's bring her on right away. Please like the video, everybody. Thank you for being here, Doctor.
Hello. Great to see you again. So how do you say your last name? I'm so sorry. I don't know.
Let's see. This guy was right. It was Niemiec.
Okay.
It's Niemiec. And actually, originally, it was Niemiec. It's Polish, but it was changed in Ellis Island.
Yeah, I knew it was a Polish
wow.
name too.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to travel in Poland. Dr. Crystal and I have a competition how many times she can say we mispronounce stuff all the time. I mispronounce medical terms and she mispronounces names.
Yeah.
So we're in a competition.
I love it.
So yeah, tell us about how you got your start. Where did you grow up and what was your relationship like with animals?
Absolutely. So I actually grew up in Los Angeles, pretty far away from animals, mostly surrounded by concrete.
We have raccoons.
Yes.
And we have pigeons and possums. I grew up in LA. I grew
deer.
up in you know what? In the San Fernando Valley, if you go far enough, you can even see a lion from time to time.
That's right. I never saw one growing up, but they're out there. You're absolutely right.
Where in Los Angeles? What neighborhood?
I grew up in Manhattan Beach.
Okay.
So the beach cities out there. Yeah, but I did engage with some wildlife in high school. I mean, I was always interested in animals, always reading about them, thinking about them, writing about them, and I got pulled into a project by my 7th grade science teacher about coyotes, actually, in Los Angeles, and I remember the day he brought me down into this canyon by the middle school, and he showed me where the coyotes were denning. And this is back when coyotes were really starting to go into the suburbs of LA. Now they're all over the place. But and he showed me where my school had set up traps, and he was actually undoing the traps every day.
Good for him.
Yes.
Were they the horrible traps, like the little
Yes, I think it was a box trap, so not as bad, but I do think they were trying to kill these coyotes. Although this was a long time ago, so my memory could be fuzzy here, but the stories we tell ourselves about our childhood.
People forget when I first moved to Orange County, it was still a thing that if you killed a coyote and brought in, I forget what piece, like his jaw, you had to bring a piece of the coyote, you bring him in, and you got paid by the county. They still had a county bounty for coyotes. This was not that long ago.
That's incredible. Well, now there's just in so many states just indiscriminate killing of coyotes in whatever way possible. But that's wild. But I remember this teacher, he was like, you need to do science to save them. Like me coming out here and messing up the traps every day. It's not a long-term systemic sustainable solution here. Yes.
What grade was this?
This was 7th grade. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And so he said, go and do science. And so I spent a lot of my high school years actually going out there trying to do a project documenting where the coyotes were coming back from. I was, the cool kid who would go out in the morning before school and hike the trails and put out gypsum traps. That's something that captures their footprints and track their scat. And I also had this hypothesis. I was like, well, if I can just show in their scat that they're not eating cats or any human related things, then like we'll stop killing them. Unfortunately, I saw they were eating cats. So yes. And so then it kind of pivoted to how do we educate the public to keep their cats indoors and to keep them safe from coyotes. But that was my first foray into wildlife and animal conservation work.
I love that. Coyote, it's a big problem, like you said, all over America. I think it's North Carolina where they had 250 red wolves left, and now they've got 20 left because they passed a law saying that you could kill any coyote you want. And of course, the average yokel doesn't know the difference between a red wolf and a coyote, and they're killing all the red wolves, an endangered species.
Yeah.
That animal species was bouncing back, and now it's not because of coyotes, because it's legal to kill coyotes. It's insane to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I saw a coyote the other night downtown LA. My sister keeps her horse at the LA Equestrian Center. When you go out there all the time, super friendly coyotes. She used to throw fetch to them, and they, bring stuff back, play tug of war with sweaters and stuff. And then people got mad at her for doing that. They're very dog-like, very,
Yeah, remember the one in Orlando we saw, Crystal? We were driving outside of the VMX. We're doing the largest veterinarian what do you call it, a convention, and we're driving out of that, and we see a coyote in the middle of the day in Orlando.
So you go from 7th grade to what you do now? Very much, was it a straight path to what you're doing now, or did you take how did you eventually end up connecting 7th grade you to where you are now? And what other careers did you pursue before that?
It was a windy path indeed. Absolutely. And I would say I was interested in animal protection work since I was a kid. Honestly, since the first time I saw a fish out of water that we had fished kind of slowly die, I was like, I care about animal suffering. But then, school, a lot of places I went to kind of beat it out of me, and I think that's a common narrative with a lot of us who go into the animal protection space. It took me about 10 years after that to stop eating animals. And it took a kind of windy career to go into animal protection. I always wanted to work in environmental and animal protection, and I was particularly interested in wildlife. So that led me slightly different from the veterinarian path. And so, sorry, Sky, I'm not actually a veterinarian. I'm a less useful doctor. I have a PhD.
I thought you were a vet. Okay.
Yeah. I told you
less useful. I mean, I have a brain of mush. I just see a bunch of letters next to people's names, and I call. But you're still a doctor. I mean, most of I think PhDs are important. Even the humanities. I graduated from the humanities, so I have a lot of respect for PhDs.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so I started in conservation work, and I actually got pulled into invasive species management. I was working on invasive trees, and then I ended up working in New Zealand for about a year. And of course, I just wanted to work on conservation issues there. And it happened to be that the main conservation issue they were dealing with was invasive mammalian predators, so stoats, rats, cats, that were basically decimating the native bird population. And so the way that the New Zealand Department of Conservation was dealing with that was they were basically dropping 1080 poison out of helicopters throughout the country to kill off these invasive mammalian predators. And then communities were getting pretty upset about this. And so my job, I was basically, they were like, "You're an new American, go talk to these communities and ask them why they're upset." Yes. Yeah. And then that was like my first kind of moral dilemma where, I was seeing this need for conservation efforts for saving these native birds, but then I was seeing all of the significant suffering that was happening through the use of 1080 to kill all of these very sentient mammals. And so at that point,
1080?
Yeah. It's a poison. Yeah. Okay. And it basically causes a pretty slow kind of internal bleeding of animals. And then people's dogs and cats were getting into it.
That's the thing. Is that why the community was upset? That's what I imagine is why they were, their pets were dying. Yeah.
Exactly. And you could imagine just living in a rural area, you go out there for peace, quiet, and then you have these helicopters dropping poison around you. It's not exactly kind of the environment you're looking for. Yes.
I guess not. This reminds me of the mongooses in Hawaii. They had a similar thing where they were introduced and they started killing the native birds, and then they had to try to figure out a way to kill mongooses. We keep doing this. It seems like it's the same. History has a tendency to echo, doesn't it?
It does. Absolutely. Yes. And actually my dissertation work was in Hawaii, also on invasive species, but invasive trees again. But yeah, that's basically why I got a PhD. I was like, this is very confusing. And I don't know how we're going to deal with these competing values to address this really difficult issue. And turns out from my perspective, I was like, this is actually an issue of social values, of what people want to see of society's morality and how we make these difficult decisions. And so that's why I actually got a PhD in kind of interdisciplinary social sciences as applied to conservation and animal issues.
That's fantastic.
Wow. So what's getting a PhD like? Was the program like what you expected? If somebody wants to follow in your path, like what might you tell them or advise them about what to expect in doing that?
Yeah, I would say, a PhD should be something that you approach because you have a problem you want to solve and you feel like you don't have enough information to solve it, and you want to get more information from the body of knowledge we've kind of come up with as a society. So and contribute to that body of knowledge. And so I think some people approach grad school because they're not sure what else to do. I would say, if you're not sure what else to do, there's lots of better things to do than a PhD. But if you do have a problem and you feel like you need kind of more information, more thought, and studying to figure it out, I think it's great for that. And I attended a PhD program that was what I loved about it was really problem oriented. And so basically it was an interdisciplinary program, which meant you could draw from all sorts of different fields and to try to develop studies to address a problem, to address a research need, to solve a conservation or environmental problem. And I think that really kind of set the stage for my career really well, even though I'm not working on the same exact things now. I really have this perspective of, instead of just doing research for research's sake or to build on the prior research, it gave me the headspace of saying, what is the problem? What is the information we don't know to solve this problem? And in that case, it was really trying to figure out, we have these invasive trees that are destroying Hawaii's ecosystem, but we need neighbors to work together to control the trees and control the spread of the trees. And so how do we do that? And we already knew from scientific studies how to address this problem in terms of, from a biological perspective, how to kill the trees and why it was so important to preserve our native species. But we didn't know how to motivate neighbors to work together on this. And so that's what I did through my PhD work.
Well, Dr. Becky, when you're talking about interdisciplinary studies, I know, sometimes I might not be the only one who has this question, because that's a lot of different subjects in college that you've got to kind of all bring together. We're talking about sociology. Are we talking about, obviously the sciences, but not just, right? What are we interdisciplining here?
I love that. I love that verb. Yes, we are integrating. In my case, I was looking at social psychology. And so social psychology has given us a lot of insight into why people behave the way they do. And so I was looking at a lot of theories of why people behave the way they do and why they are willing or not to work with other people and in what context. And so I was applying those theories. And then I was also applying sociology theories on when neighborhoods are neighborhoods that are positive to interact in, when people actually engage with each other, versus the neighborhoods that are not, and why, and how you might create that more kind of friendly atmosphere where people are working together. And then I was also applying some more ecology work. So I was actually using remote sensing data to look at these invasive trees over time, and how their distribution changed over time in response to people's actions. So that's an example of interdisciplinary work, really building on the tools from so many different parts of science and so many different types of sciences to try to answer these questions.
Wow. So do you feel like your work has resulted in impactful change? And if so, what are the impacts of some of this research that you've done?
Well, I will say that research was quite a ways ago now. I'm many years past my PhD, and my career has taken a bit of a pivot in the meantime. And I think one of the most interesting things about my career is, when I was doing the most sciencey type stuff, I actually felt like I was having less of an impact on the real world. And now I do a lot more stuff at the science policy interface, focused on animal protection. And I find that work does have impact. And so I find I spend a lot of my time doing research that then I testify on in support of bills focused on animal protection. And what's super interesting about science is sometimes I think science can get really in the weeds, and then we want to have the fanciest theory or the fanciest methodology, but sometimes the most simple information can make a huge impact. And so a lot of what we do now, and what I do now to try to make impact, is actually just collecting some often basic information on public opinion, what people want to see around animal protection, what some of the problems are that bills and policies can address, and how some solutions might address that.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I know like the recent bills in Colorado, the predator protection bills were reframed and spun as ballot box biology by many, including Joe Rogan really jumped on that. Would you ever be interested in being on Joe Rogan's show to talk to him about that? And can you, I don't know how much you know, I'm sure you know a lot about the wolf situation. Can you like walk us through that situation and the competing interests and like what we actually should be doing to address these predators?
Yeah, I would love to, because that's actually a focus of my center's work right now, is understanding wildlife ballot initiatives and some of the recent initiatives in Colorado. So that ballot initiative you referred to, Prop 127, it failed in the 2024 elections. It would have banned the trophy hunting of mountain lions and bobcats, and it did fail. And you know, one of the reasons why it was somewhat surprising that it failed is because studies out of my department here at CSU have found that the public's values towards wildlife have been shifting over the time, and more people in the public actually want to see animal protection initiatives. They want to see less animals, especially carnivores, hunted, and they're less supportive of trophy hunting. And so it was really surprising to see this initiative fail. So one of the things we actually did, because we're a policy research center, is we did a follow-up study right after the ballot initiative to look at why it failed. And so we went out in December right after the vote and did interviews of voters all throughout the state, out in the cold. It was very, very cold time. We did intercept samples.
Colorado could get cold. I mean, yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Every time I'm in Colorado, I'm like, I could live here. And then I go in the winter and I'm like, I can't live here.
Absolutely. December happens. Yes. Yes. So we were out there in the cold in front of grocery stores, post offices, that sort of thing, asking people to take a brief survey on why they voted for against Prop 127. And Crystal, exactly what you said, about this idea of ballot box biology was the reason that people voted against it. And so what is the ballot box biology argument? And I will say I would love to go on Joe Rogan's show to debate this all day.
Awesome.
The ballot box biology argument is basically, it was promoted by the hunting movement. And this argument was basically like the public should not be voting on wildlife initiatives because they should be left to the experts. So wildlife decisions should be left to our state wildlife management agencies, and those biologists in those agencies who should be making decisions. The public should not be making decisions on this. And so that really persuaded people. And I think why it was so effective is it basically persuaded liberals, especially, who tend to value more, that scientific expertise. And then they were saying, oh, wait, we should leave things to the experts. I would have voted for this, but now I'm not going to vote for it because now it seems like it's against my values.
Yeah.
So it's
so clever.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say, that argument is a fallacy for several reasons. And so the first is this idea of leaving things to the experts. It doesn't quite make sense because our experts, basically the folks who are making the ultimate decisions about wildlife, they are our wildlife commissions. And those commissions, people usually think of, what is a commission? It must be a bunch of biologists, right? Sitting in a room, or maybe some social scientists, maybe other scientists sitting in a room making decisions. Well, typically it's not. So it's actually, most commissions are political commissioners, are political appointees. And so they're appointed by the governor. And typically there are a certain number of seats in each commission that go to agricultural interests and hunting interests. And the vast majority of commissions don't have a single spot for a biologist. So when we say leave things, wildlife management decisions to the experts, we're actually, the truth is we're leaving wildlife management decisions to our industries and to politically appointed representatives of industries. So that's the first problem with this argument. The second problem with the argument is wildlife management is not just all about science. We like to think it is, but it's not. Wildlife management is a combination of science and biology and public values. And so our traditional way of managing wildlife, it's called the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. It was basically developed by hunters for hunters. And so the idea of wildlife management is we manage wildlife populations so people can go out and hunt. That hunting then funds conservation, and let's make sure we keep enough species, enough populations out there so we can continue to hunt. And then people added that and said, okay, well, let's make sure we're doing some good things for ecosystems, for biodiversity. But that doesn't consider the interests of the public in general, right? And as I mentioned before, the public's interests are starting to change. More and more people want to see wildlife managed for wildlife's benefit. They want to see reductions in things like trophy hunting, but there's no way for those changing values to be incorporated in this very old school way of managing, which is basically white hunters.
Can I ask you the old white hunters thing? I mean, it strikes a chord, of course, because of how, three white people, both all raised in America. We probably all have varying degrees of experience from the great white hunters of North America, right? But I don't think any of us are unscathed. But to what do you attribute that change of values? Where does this reverence for wildlife just sprout up from nowhere? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's been a variety of different hypotheses that have been explored by social scientists. And, I can share some of them. I don't think we know. It's hard with some of the social phenomenon because we don't have the chance to do like a randomized experiment to figure out exactly the causal effects.
But you're in the trenches. What do you think? I guess, unofficially, I suppose.
Yes. But I think some of it is, more people are moving to cities. And as people are moving to cities, they start to have a different relationship with wildlife. They're not dealing with the day-to-day conflict of wildlife. And so they see wildlife less as something causing problems in their life, and then can instead see wildlife as something that they go to and enjoy. So that may be causing the shift in public values. But another thing is more and more people have pets, and more people think of their pets as family. In fact, we just did a recent poll in Colorado finding that 82% of pet owners consider their pets family. And so as people's relationships, and this has changed a lot in the past several decades, people didn't used to think this. So as people's relationships with their own pets change and they're less in conflict with wildlife every day, they start to see animals as, their own beings, their own sentient beings with their own interests that maybe are deserving of rights and well-being. And so their values towards wildlife then start to change.
Or at least consideration, right? I guess like they deserve more. Geez, that just threw a wrench in my preconceived notions about whether or not we should have pets in the world. I mean, I've had a really strong feeling that we should not have any pets. I've been against,
and I've been long thought that horses are the gateway drug to animal rights activism. So
I don't know
and maybe reptiles too are the gateway drug as well. Going to these reptile shows and seeing this. But how do we combat this idea that these commissions are the experts, and like what kind of campaign could we do to what do we need in order to combat this ballot box biology myth that killed very important legislation?
Absolutely. Well, I think we need some general public education campaigns on basically like how our wildlife is managed and for what purpose right now. And so I think when I go around and I tell most people like what our commissions constitute of in terms of the types of appointments, most people don't know that information. So we need to educate people on our commissions. We need there's a great organization called Wildlife for All who is doing some work on reform around wildlife commissions. And they're trying to pass laws basically saying, our commissions actually have to include biologists, not just industry representatives. So that sort of institutional change is really important as well. But also this needs to start in the way that we're educated. And so most, like when you think about wildlife biology degrees in undergrad, most people who are professors talk about the North American model of wildlife conservation like it's this thing, like that's just science, that's just how things are. It's a good thing, we need to follow it. And instead, we need a more comprehensive education about the history of wildlife management. How did it actually start for whom, and who is now involved in decision making, and how our values are changing. And so maybe our institutions need to reflect those changing public values. And so I really think we just need, I bet if you pulled any random person on the street right now and asked them, do our wildlife agencies generally represent the interests of our public? Most would say, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, but the data does not suggest that.
Yeah, I've talked to a few students who wanted to get into wildlife conservation because they were animal rights, oriented people, and then entered the field, participated in some of this research, and realized, oh, this isn't what I thought it was at all. Like, a lot of my coworkers, colleagues are hunters. They don't view animals the same way I do. I've talked to lots of vets who worked in wildlife, who were the only female vet in a group of men. They had really outdated sort of patriarchal ideas about how to manage wildlife. One being, the cougars and the panthers in Florida, they would tree them with dogs to, and then dart them. Once they were in the tree, they would fall from the tree, break limbs, and they'd collar them and then treat the broken limbs if, that was a problem. When it's like, there are so many better ways to do this. If we got more diverse perspectives into this line of work. So I think that will go a long way in changing the culture. And I think a lot of people, go into it with that animal rights mindset, and then they realize it's not that, and then they leave. They self-select against continuing in this field. And I would just encourage them to stick with it and find support. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. How do we change the culture of these, departments? I guess.
Yeah, Dr. Niemiec, how do we build bridges between these institutions and stakeholders and all of these seemingly disparate groups?
Yeah, those are great questions. I would say one of the things I've been wanting to do is just create some curriculum that all, wildlife conservation, wildlife biology teachers can teach on basically the history of wildlife management and what values wildlife management has typically managed for. And so that's hunting, that's consumptive uses, as well as, ecosystem benefits, and population, healthy populations, especially of ungulates, of hunted species, and what values they're not managing for, and what it would look like to manage for those additional values, like, reducing the suffering of wildlife and improving wildlife well-being as well. And so I think it could be as simple of even just having a unit on that in every wildlife biology class of, who has been included, who hasn't been included in the history of wildlife management, and whose values are heard and whose aren't. I feel like that could go a long ways, because those students that you're talking about, Crystal, like, if they just see a little bit of an ounce of themselves in it, they could say, okay, that's where I see myself. This is where I can make an impact and push this forward. I would also say, we just need to push for folks to be in those agency positions. And so it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle where people go into state government, maybe, who have these more progressive ideas, and then they get burned out and then they leave. And so we need to get, a healthy majority of folks into these positions in state fish and wildlife agencies that have those more progressive values towards wildlife, so that they can support each other. And I can say, I can relate. I worked for state government for a bit in a Department of Agriculture, and I ended up quitting, in part because it was just so hard being one of the few people with my values in that agency. And so the more that we can get, norms around how we teach this, and norms of who are accepted into these management positions in state fish and wildlife agencies, I think the more change we'll start to see.
I'm so curious about that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. I'm so curious about that, because when I was in Virginia, I lived in a pretty rural area in the Shenandoah Valley, and there were conservatives there that were so interested in conservation. And you said progressive. You said the word progressive twice. Progressive values, and I've never understood how. But when push came to shove, these conservatives who loved agricultural easements and wildlife preserves, or whatever they called them over there, as soon as you talked about conservation, though, and push came to shove, they thought of it as progressive, and they thought that was liberal or something. They reapplied different labels. But if you got them talking about the Appalachian Trail and communing with nature and how important it was to keep the purity of the Appalachian Trail, they sounded a lot like progressives. And I mean, why is that's a progressive value? I mean, is it a progressive value?
Well, I don't think it should be. I think that's a great question. I think like animal protection, caring about animal well-being, caring about species, populations, that really is a value that most Americans, I would say like 80 to 90% of Americans have, regardless of political affiliation. And so I guess what I meant by progressive values is really the values of caring about individual animal welfare and suffering in addition to just conservation, if that makes sense. And so,
totally does.
But even that, I do a lot of polling. That's a lot of what my center does, a lot of national polling on a variety of issues. And when we ask people, like, do you support, for example, bag limits on the number of carnivores that people can kill each season? Like for a lot of species like coyotes, no bag limits. Hunters can kill as many as they want, and so would you support that? The vast majority of Americans, regardless of political affiliation, say, yes, we would support that. Would we ask people and say, hey, should we put some restrictions so that people can only engage in fair chase hunting practices? So instead of, using electronic calling devices, which is, for example, in the neighboring state in Wyoming, people can use those. They mimic the sounds of prey or young in the den, and they can basically call in wolves, other carnivores, so that they can then shoot them. That's not fair chase. That's not fair hunting. And to me, it violates the very principle of hunting, which is supposed to be you against the animal, you trying to find the animal, not kind of cheating in this way.
Doesn't seem sportsmanlike, really.
Exactly. Yeah. But these practices, also running animals over, coyotes, wolves with snowmobiles, these are common practices, especially in Western states. But when we ask the majority of the public, do you want to see this? People say, no, we don't want this. Once again, across political divides. And I think what's so hard is then when things go on the ballot, because our state wildlife agencies are not listening to the public, saying, where the public's like, we don't want to see this. Wildlife agencies are like, we don't really care. We're managing for this particular stakeholder group, And so then the rest of the public is like, okay, fine, we're going to run a ballot initiative. But then as soon as something gets on the ballot, things become politicized. And so then you have, the NRA, you have hunting groups lining on the anti-animal protection ballot initiative to align with hunting rights. Then it becomes politicized, and then we have Joe Rogan basically talking about the solid box biology argument, and then it tricks a lot of the liberals who are not like thinking too hard about these issues into being like, oh yeah, trust the experts, and then here we are. And so we need to figure out kind of new models for really push our agencies to say, hey, you should be managing in the public interest. This is the public interest. No one wants to see a wolf run over with a snowmobile in the 21st century here.
Yeah, I mean, in Virginia, it's not just a Western state. They were doing it with trucks out of season. They would run over deer, and then they would whatever that piece is back here that they like to eat, and then they throw the rest of the corpse away. I mean,
wow.
Horrible
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah. And it makes other hunters look bad. I mean, it doesn't make you look cool. It doesn't make you look manly. There's no reason to do it. And it makes all other hunters look bad. And, it was similar when I was working on animal cruelty neglect cases. I found a lot of times ranchers wanted to help me with getting animals from these cases and ensuring these animals were safe after running these cases, and were relieved that I came in and addressed these animal cruelty cases, because they were saying, this is making us look bad. We don't these cases are horrible, and we don't want to be associated with that. That's what we need to hold our hunting community towards. We shouldn't make all other hunters who are engaging in fair chase practices look bad by allowing these horrible things to happen, by allowing the super lazy dude to chase down deer with a snowmobile. And maybe I'll stop there.
I love it. Changing course a little bit. You've published more than 30 scientific articles, and I'm kind of starting my journey into publishing academic peer-reviewed articles. So I'd just like to know, for my own benefit, like, what is your process for writing a paper? From the software do you use? Do you use Zotero? Do you just do a Google Doc? Like, tell me about your process, how long it usually takes you, and what would you tell somebody like me who's just starting? writing scientific articles.
Gotcha. And do you have, so you have your data, you have your analyses done, and you're actually at the writing stage. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I just published in the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education this paper on terminal animal use, and that took like 3 years because we had so much data, and got another co-author and all of it. And it was a long process of trying to get these schools to give us the data and then processing the data. Now I hope my process will be a lot faster in the future. And I've suffered a lot of bullying, and from the results of that paper, a lot of cyberbullying has happened as a result of that. But yeah. But what do you
best practices?
Do you do a Word doc? Do you use any of this writing software? Like, I want the nitty gritty of what your process is, basically. How do you store and track sources, all of this stuff?
Oh my gosh. Well, I should use Zotera. People have tried to get me to use it like 100 times. And then, and if I were to start over, I would do that and have this big database of all the scientific papers that I've ever read, and use that to easily cite things. You know, I think it's a great best practice, because I think something that still needs to be worked out in academia is just streamlining the process. As you know, sometimes you submit a paper to a different journal. To one journal, they say it's not a good fit. You submit it to another, and suddenly you have to restructure and use a different format for references and all of that kind of stuff for this new academic journal. And so it can take a lot of time. So I think that is a best practice. Zotera and those other reference management softwares can help you with that kind of pivoting that often happens in academia. You know, I think trying to, honestly, I use Google Docs, I use Word docs, I just start writing ideas. I think something that is beautiful about academia is, you know, once you've been doing it for a while in your field, it gets easier and easier to write the paper each time, because instead of trying to find every single citation, you kind of remember. You're like, I already wrote this in the last paper, now we're building off of this. And so let's build off of these references. But you know, I think the introduction is almost the most important part of a scientific paper. And I had an advisor once in my PhD who gave me some great advice for how to write a scientific introduction. And basically, he said that there's like 5 paragraphs, and you want to think about, and this depends based on the actual journal, but you want to start with kind of the big picture, the general problem that you're trying to address. You know, is that farmed animal welfare? Is that research animals or wildlife protection initiatives? And then talk about what the problem is. And then you want to talk a little bit more specifically about, you know, within this bigger problem, what has been done? What is known about addressing this problem? And that's where you really want to make sure you give credit to a lot of the good work that has already happened. And that's often when I'm reviewing papers where I see, especially kind of new folks who are new to the field, missing out, where we're like, oh, wait, there's actually already a lot of stuff. We should make sure we're building on that. And then afterwards, you want to talk about your gap. And so that's basically like, what is not known about this problem? I already told you everything that's known. What is not known, and why is addressing that unknown so important for moving forward that problem? And then you want to talk about, okay, so we address that unknown in this way. This is the sort of general methodology or theory we apply and to address that unknown. And here are our research questions. So I think, you know, people say that there's no one prescription for writing an introduction or writing the beginning of an academic paper, but I find that general format to be really helpful for anyone who's starting the academic writing process.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And yeah, I really appreciate that. It's a challenge, and it also goes to show you don't need to be a PhD to write academic articles. I am not, and a lot of my co-authors were not either. Have you faced any bullying as a result of your scientific writing or your work, or any retaliation or backlash from any of your work?
I have. Yes, you know, a lot actually. And so, you know, I think that maybe it's just something that comes along with fighting for animals every day. And, you know, and when you fight really for what's right and for the voiceless, people will do what they can to try to bring you down. Something that I've noticed is the more that my work makes an impact, the more that I face bullying and harassment. And so I try to remind myself, even though it's hard every day, that the bullying and harassment is actually kind of a badge of honor. It means that you're making people uncomfortable. But so when I first started my job at the Bureau of Animal Protection, I had done some research on the wolf reintroduction and other wildlife stuff, and the ag community and some reporters caught wind of that, and basically my name was smeared across media. County commissioners were writing letters to the governor trying to get me fired. I was asked to go on an apology tour where I went around the state, and there'd be rooms full of 200 people yelling at me about how much they hated me for being in this in this new position, building out this program under the governor and the Department of Ag. And then even now, within Colorado State University, we're an ag school. I've been threatened with disciplinary action for trying to share research on animal cruelty and neglect that I did with policymakers and suggest policy ideas based on that, which, by the way, we're bipartisan. Everyone wants to address animal cruelty and neglect. And, and even within the Department of Ag, just kind of general harassment, bullying every day for working on animal protection issues. And so, but I would just say to those folks who are facing that, you're not alone, and know that it's also not personal, and know that it's because you're making an impact that's happening. And they're trying to bring you down and taking it basically as a badge of honor, like, bring it, I can take it. But also taking care of yourself. Like, I will admit there's days that I just have to be like, this morning I'm going to cry about how disappointed I am and how the world is treating me. But then you pick yourself back up and you can go to sleep at night knowing that you are on the right side of history.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what do you do for self-care when you're being bombarded by all of this vitriol? And I get to this point too, where I'm like, I'm just like disappointed in people, my children of this earth. Like, I am so disappointed in you right now. How do you get through that? And like, what gives you hope?
I'm still learning, but I think, and one of the things I'm doing is learning from like folks such as yourself who have been through it and risen above. And I find that the most important people is once you put yourself out there and are starting to really share your voice and make an impact and push back. And it's extremely important to try to surround yourself by those who will lift you up, and those who will support you, and those who will inspire you. And so I think, finding yourself a network of folks who you can trust, that inner network of people who will always say, call me the next time you get bullied on an online hunter forum and they're making up names for your center, call me and let's talk about it, and I'm there for you and you're doing the right thing. I think that inner network is so important. And I honestly think the animal protection movement needs more of that. There's a lot of infighting in the movement. There's a lot of tearing each other down. Just yesterday, I had my work torn down by folks who were working on endangered species protection stuff because they didn't like that I did a messaging study showing that one of their messages wasn't working very well. And it's one of those things where it's like, we don't need to do that. We're all working so hard. We're all dealing with this bullying and harassment. We should lift each other up and we should be there for each other. And instead of seeing our differences in the movement as a reason for being in conflict with each other, we should see our differences as a strength. And so there's some really amazing sociology work on how social movements happen, and that's shown that you need people on all ends of a movement for a movement to be successful. You need the folks who are seen as quote unquote extreme,
the radical flank,
the Overton, who are pushing that Overton window of what's normal. But then you need the folks over here who are then like, okay, we'll all compromise with other side now that we've pushed the window this way. You know, you need the scientists trying out the messaging, you need the people on the ground implementing the messaging, and so you need everyone, and everyone needs to coordinate. And I've found that the animal movement, they don't quite love coordinating. And I think, I think it's because there's such limited resources that people feel like they need to protect themselves. But we're here to help animals, and to help animals, we need to help each other and need to work together.
But does any movement actually coordinate? I mean, I don't think that John Brown was coordinating with Harriet Tubman. You just had one guy thought that killing slaveholders was the answer, and the other person thought that learning ways to abscond with slaves, to free the slaves, was the way. They didn't work together. And then the people who were doing the oration and doing the education, they were considered more legitimate because they were more reasonable and more rational. Let's talk to them. We can't talk to John Brown. He's killing slaveholders. I don't think they were coordinating. And I listening, it actually brings me a lot of solace when I hear about the people who are vets and PhDs who are also receiving this kind of this vitriolic response, because when you're out there doing activism, you hear that all the time. Why aren't you if you just did it the right way, people would stop threatening to kill you. And no, it turns out doing it the right way, no matter what, when you're challenging the status quo, people threaten to kill you. And it's not just the animal movement either. It's anytime you're kind of challenging the status quo or the hierarchies or the hegemonic situation we're in, people threaten to kill you. That's just their go-to. I get death threats every single day, and I'm not publishing academic papers under my own name. I'm not doing any of that stuff. So,
I mean, and also, honestly, death threats are not the worst thing. I would rather have a death threat than one of my colleagues going around messaging my veterinarians who are friends with me and telling them, did you know Crystal's really a bad person, untrustworthy, and she lies all the time? That's what's happened to me. And that's like getting my friends to disconnect from me, to not trust me, my colleagues, fellow activists.
Yeah, that happened to me too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Share my work. Like, that is
true.
I would rather a death threat than to have that.
Well, I use the death threat as the extreme example, but I think all of us have experienced the spectrum of bullying, and anybody who is just has an unpopular, it just isn't sharing the popular opinion that animals are objects that should be used as such. Just saying that out loud welcomes that spectrum.
Yeah, it's so disturbing, and it's so disturbing that often, like, the worst barriers to your own work are often from the people who should be aligned with you and should be supporting you, and that's kind of very frustrating.
But to Dr. Niemiec's point, I mean, this is what I would love for that coordination to occur. And you're right. There's all these sociologists have gone deep into the nature of social justice movements. I don't think any of them actually coordinated that much. I feel like they just have these weird alliances form, and it just happens naturally. But there's always infighting. I mean, the Black Panthers teamed up with the Americans for Disability Rights to get stuff done. But there were people within the Black Panther Party who hated each other and were having the the narcissism of small differences. And same thing with the Americans with Disabilities. They had the same issues, infighting. It happens in every single movement.
And we often confuse people who are actually trying to strengthen the movement by critiquing some of the things with infighting. And I think that's a huge problem. But switching back to your work, what would you like to see changed in academia that might be able to help some of the barriers to more progress in your line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say to that point of the infighting and the strategic coordination, I agree. I don't think we could take everyone in the movement in a big happy room and be like, let's all let's all agree on priorities, and say like, you're playing this role in the movement. But I do think we don't need to tear each other down as much. I think we can learn from these past movements and
Agreed.
and just refocus our energy once again on the goal rather than each other.
You're totally right. You think that we would get better, right? You think that after like the free speech movement, be like, they had a good idea. Let's try to do that, but better. We'll learn from their mistakes. But we never do. We still have the same infighting, the same harassment, the same all the same symptoms every single time. I don't know. We never learn, I guess.
Yeah.
But I agree. We should learn. Yes.
We could dream. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But, academia, you were saying what changes I'd want to see in academia. I think I would encourage academics to focus, a little bit less on the traditional metrics of impact in academia and more on the real world impact of their work. And so, in academia, we have these, a citation count, we have something called an H-index. It's all the, basically how much our studies are cited. We get our academic funding from a variety of sources. And typically, that's the way in which academics are judged on, the success of their work. But that those indices don't actually tell us anything about how much of our work is actually making an impact, so did your work actually inform policy? Did it inform practice? Did it inform real world messaging and education, whatever it is? And so I would love to see in academia a shift towards the way we're evaluated towards those real world metrics. Like, did you engage with media? Did you engage with real folks on the ground who were working on initiatives? Did you engage with policymakers? That's something I would love to see in terms of a difference that I think would make a real difference to the world. And I will say we have this idea of tenure, and I feel really grateful. I just got tenure in June.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. And so and tenure is an extremely unique privilege. It basically, for those of you who are not super familiar with it, it basically means you shouldn't be fired for your ideas. You shouldn't be fired for anything you say, anything you write, as long as it's like fairly reasonable and not harming people. You should be able to say and do what you want, essentially, to advance
academic
your
freedom.
Field. Exactly. And you're no longer trying to prove yourself by the traditional metrics. You have now established yourself as a key voice. And now you should take that and do what you want. And
that's my favorite part of academia, actually. Yes. It's why I came close to doing a PhD, because of that. I read this, that you become no longer simply a consumer of knowledge, but a producer of knowledge. And that sounds like a black belt in karate to me. That sounds pretty, you become the master. And I love that.
Absolutely. And I would say it's a uniquely privileged position, but a lot of academics don't use that privilege to then be a platform for change. I think a lot of academics are like, I got tenure, so I'll keep doing my thing. I'll publish my little papers, I'll get my research funds and do my little lab stuff. And
it's all downhill from here.
And it just means maybe I have to work a little bit less hard, but instead it's like, you're one of the few people in the world who have a job where you should be able to get paid. You could talk to students, you could talk to policymakers, you could talk whatever you want. Absolutely. And you can't get fired for that, for advocating for what you believe in.
Noam Chomsky,
I think, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why Noam Chomsky counts academics as part of the top agenda setters. They're they're the ones that don't stand to risk as much by helping set an agenda for the rest of us. Yeah. I mean, who better, theoretically?
It's also scary how corporate interests have now realized some of their best people and executives are more effective placed in public universities than they are in sitting in boardrooms, which is why we have the UC Davis Clear Center. And in Colorado, you have I forget what it's called. There's a cattle industry thing, and I'm blanking on it. Is it Sarah Place who runs it? I'm blanking on what it's called.
Ag Next Institute.
Ag
Yes.
Next, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're fighting. We have to put our people who are serving the interests of the public and the environment and
the animals,
all beings, not just corporate beings, in there in enough positions to combat those corporate things, corporate people. So yeah, I'm glad you're there in Colorado fighting.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. It is important to have multiple voices. We have a pretty strong ag community here at CSU, and in fact, CSU does accepts a ton of money to do research on promoting agricultural interests, and so it did take a pretty big fight to push back and say, no, I deserve to be here just as much as them, doing my research, promoting the interests of animals and the interest of animal welfare. And but I think we need more people in these positions, because tenure is a beautiful thing where you can really make an impact.
So what would you, if you could do anything to make the world a better place for everyone, what is the thing that you would do?
Wow, that's
a tough question. Sorry.
No, I love it. I would I would probably just make I think, I guess we're focusing on animals. And so in terms of making the world a better place for animals, which I think would also make the world a better place for people, I think we need people to step out of their comfort zone and share that they do care about animals. So one of the things that has been most striking about my research is that something you said earlier, Skye, is that we're dissenting voices. Like, most people think of animals as objects. What I find really interesting from all the public polling that we've done at the center is basically that it's actually the majority of the public doesn't think of animals as objects. They think they care about the welfare of animals. And so we've done polling and basically have asked people, would you support all of these different animal protection initiatives, whether that's ranging from, everything we talked about with wildlife to requiring that pigs and factory farms at least have enough space to turn around and stretch their legs, before being sent to slaughter. So we've asked all these questions about farmed animal welfare, animal cruelty, neglect, wildlife welfare, and the vast majority of the public supports these initiatives. But one of the things that we find that's interesting is when we ask people, do you think other people care about wildlife or animal protection issues? People underestimate that. And so the majority of the public thinks that no one else cares, when in reality, most people do care. And so and actually there's a phenomenon for this that describes this in social psychology literature. It's called pluralistic ignorance. And it's basically where, so you've heard of it. It's basically this idea of people are they are misinterpreting what other people are thinking or doing. And this could have a huge impact on people's own behaviors as well as policies. And so if I were to wave a magic wand, I would just immediately correct pluralistic ignorance on this issue, because studies have shown that when you correct pluralistic ignorance, people change their behavior. Politicians are more likely to listen to issues. And that's what the research shows, is people do care about animals. They think that others don't care about animals. So if we can just convince the public of what's already true, that the majority does care about animals, I think we can make a lot of progress. And I think that's something that gives me hope. Like, we're not starting with numbers like in the 20% support animal protection issues. We're starting with the majority. And there's this misperception that's created by powerful industries that it's not the majority. And so if I could just wave a magic wand and fix that, I think we would be good to go for protecting animals.
You know what that sounds like to me, Crystal? Like, because this is something that we talk about a lot in all of our, because we do the ethical we do a couple shows and I talk about ethics, and it seems like most people care about most things, most other people, most other animals, but this pursuit of profit takes another
Well, it's our systems that
it's right.
Incentivize not what we actually want to do,
or like to
not who we actually want to serve. Yeah.
A stiff, don't show any emotion. Make sure that this is the rational face. I'm doing the hard stuff. I'm making these hard decisions for the greater good. And this is a job that needs to be done, and only I can do it.
How veterinarians justify things like
Right.
ventilation shutdown. We had no other choice when, don't really think about it further about like, well, we don't have to set policy that ventilation shutdown is the way to do it. So there's a lot of justification that different stakeholders do.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you're keeping up with Dr. Niemiec, if you're keeping up with the fringe animal rights stuff, like, because you mentioned wildlife welfare a few times, and have you heard like a lot of these effective altruists and a lot of these utilitarians? They'll be talking about how, I'm just going to come out and say it's a weird idea, but the ideas of killing carnivores because you'll lower the amount of suffering of herbivores or quote unquote prey animals. How am I supposed to respond to that? I feel like I've gotten in so many arguments about this. Do you have a take?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, my take would be, you could argue about theoretical, ideas around what the optimal like wildlife management would be. But to me, it's not helpful and it's distracting. And I would encourage anyone having that discussion to focus on the policies that we can do today to reduce the greatest amount of suffering. And so we haven't even gotten to the place yet where where there's limits on the number of carnivores killed in a lot of states. Here in Colorado, people are trapping an unlimited number of bobcats to sell their fur. So that's still happening here in Colorado. So why are we wasting time and energy arguing about this ideal state of what the world would look like to reduce suffering, when we could be focusing all of that energy and attention working together on passing policies to reduce the things that are causing the greatest amount of suffering? So anyone who's engaging in those debates, I would just encourage them to spend a little bit of time just working on the ground on these policies with all of us who are fighting every day on programs and policies that actually reduce that suffering.
So if we're talking about wildlife
hypotheticals,
what are those real world ones? So I can link us out of the hypothetical. What are those real? Give me like the top one or two or three that are like the ones that we can actually focus on. If you had your druthers and we got all the soldiers together and
yes, I would say, listing off for wildlife, I would say it's putting bag limits on the number of carnivores that could be killed, and also mesopredators, so animals like raccoons, and so limiting the numbers that can be killed, limiting the methods by which they can be killed, and so these kind of fair chase laws that we talked about. And so limiting, for example, using dogs to treat mountain lions or chase bears, limiting the use of electric calling devices, limiting the killing of coyotes and other carnivores when they're in their dens with their young, limiting running animals over with snowmobiles, making it very clear that our animal cruelty laws apply to wildlife. I've been doing some great interviews with folks who are the special prosecutor focused on animal cruelty for states. So Washington, Oregon, Virginia, Florida has these special prosecutors. And one of the things that these special prosecutors have done is actually been able to focus on wildlife cases and been able to say, okay, if our state wildlife agency is not going to take these on as cruelty cases, I am on behalf of the state. And now we're treating this as cruelty and we're going to prosecute it. So getting those state prosecutors in every state as well so that they could take on wildlife cases. Those are examples of wildlife initiatives. Also getting our USDA, our federal agencies, instead of investing all of their funds and efforts into lethal control to address conflict with farmed animals on the range, focusing on non-lethal methods, which have been proven to be more effective at preventing depredations by carnivores on livestock. And so changing the way that our federal agencies are investing their funds as well. We did a lot of work in that here in Colorado, getting our Department of Agriculture to set up a non-lethal program for managing conflict with wolves and actually helping ranchers get out range riders and other new ranching techniques to reduce conflict with carnivores. So those are some places to start with our wildlife.
I love it. So much to do, so much to work on instead of these stupid theoretical conversations that don't actually lead to anywhere. I love it. And how can people find you? I know you have a podcast. What do you recommend people do? Can they follow you and find out more information about what work you're doing?
Absolutely. And so we have a website, Animal Human Policy
Yay.
Center. You can look up, and on it, you can see all of our latest research that we post as blogs. We post these white papers and reports because, as you mentioned, Dr. Heath, academic papers can take years and years, and we know a lot of these issues are urgent. And so that's why we post these white papers and policy reports as soon as we have the data available. And we always post all data, all results from the data that we look at. And then we also have a podcast that you can access via our website, and you could find my email there. And so definitely follow us along, reach out to me if you are interested in opportunities for collaboration.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you. It's so interesting. Sky, do you have anything?
I have so much, but I know we don't have any more time. I hope that we're able to talk again. And
maybe, we could have you back and
that would be great.
Sky's burning questions answered.
Well, no, I think it'd be fun maybe on one of our other shows where we get into like the ethics of, maybe we could explore some hypotheticals. It'd be great to get a perspective of someone who's actually in the trenches doing something for animals instead of just a debate bro in a gamer chair who's spouting off opinions. You know, I'd rather have that conversation with someone who's actually doing something about it. And you're right. Hypotheticals are kind of stupid, but they do kind of test where we're coming from, and it kind of tests our positions on these issues. I mean, and whether we like it or not, this is where a lot of our movement lives. They live in the hypothetical. That's what they spend their time talking about and thinking about. And you know, you're right. There's nothing substantive that might come out of it, but I think there's a lot of soft returns about having those conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say with the hypothetical, if you kill all the carnivores, then there's going to be overpopulation of prey species. And so then that overpopulation will cause suffering and slow death, possibly of more welfare implications than being killed by a carnivore. But we can do that later.
I would love to one of these days. And but thank you so freaking much. It's been such, like I said, I misspoke in the beginning, but I wasn't misspeaking about how inspirational I always feel at the end of these conversations, and this is no exception. I really appreciate you talking to us on All Beings Considered, and I put you link to the Animal Human Policy Center in the chat so people can follow. And please look up Dr. Becky Niemiec and find out more about her work. Thank you.
And everybody who's watching, message Joe Rogan and tell her that she needs to be on his show. So
exactly.
I think that would be great.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This was such an honor and a lot of fun. Really
appreciate
it.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much,
I can't
Crystal.
hear. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you so much. Is it playing through your TV or something when I do that?
No, it wasn't. I saw your mouth move, but I couldn't hear your words for a couple seconds. But now
I was just saying, thanks, Crystal. That was great. That was really wonderful. And I feel like another successful All Beings Considered episode. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Please like the video. Please share the video. We are trying to get our honors YouTube up in the we've gotten some traction. There's more subscribers every day. We'd love to push that up. Please share it on your own YouTube channels. Everything can be, you can just share as a post on YouTube. That would be helpful. Paul Campbell's all the way over there on the west coast of Ireland in Galway watching on Facebook. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who kept the chat going. And also on Instagram. I'm sharing on Instagram, and there's some people over there. So thank you, everybody, for watching.
And we still have matching donors, and we need to, raise some funds. We were a little over $1,000 short of last month's goal. So if you could donate, that would be awesome. ourhonor.org/donate. Your donation is matched up to $25,000. Our Venmo at Our Honor. Super helpful so we can continue these podcasts and the important work that we're doing to change the culture of the veterinary profession, get veterinarians on board with animal advocacy campaigns to strengthen the movement, and talk to great people like Dr. Niemiec. So
yes, and with the matching donor, if you don't know how that works, everybody, that means we have a donor that says anything that we're able to raise, they're going to double that. 5 gets you 10, 10 gets you 20, and we just we'll just you get our undying love and appreciation as well. Thank you. We'll see you next. Oh, we're going to do FOIA Friday this Friday?
Yes, unless we might have a special guest. I have to coordinate. We'll see.
So either way, we will be live on this channel at 4 p.m. on Friday, right?
Maybe not, but we'll stay tuned and check your local listings.
Which means subscribe and put that bell icon on YouTube, please. Yeah. And if you're on Twitter, we got lots of viewers on Twitter this time, but I don't know why. Twitter just released a new function where you can comment on live streams. It's a new function. I'm not sure how it works over on Twitter, but I don't see any comments coming from Twitter. Yeah. We've only gotten a couple.
I don't know if people are just like, they have it on their phone, they're listening, but they're not in a position to type a comment. I get that. Maybe. But it would helpful, like a little emoji heart, a little retweet would be really great.
Yeah, so retweet's great function. That's a function people are familiar with. I don't think they know that the new functionality has been introduced on Twitter. I mean, I just don't think people know.
Realize that we can talk to them, we can see their comments, and we'll talk back.
Comments, yes. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We'll see you again either way, and thanks, Dr. Crystal Heath. My name is Skyjack Morgan, and next Monday we are also going to do Vegan World Radio on kpft.org streaming live, or if you're in the Houston area, 90.1 KPFT FM. All right, thank you everybody. Bye. That was great. She was awesome.
Yeah.